Hello everyone, welcome to LeetCode Weekly, where every week we cover a few LeetCode problems. Alright, so this is LeetCode problem 334, increasing triplet subsequence. We're given an array called nums, and we need to determine whether there exists a triplet, ijk, such that the indices are in order and the values are strictly increasing. The key thing to note here is that we don't need to return the triplet subsequence itself, just whether it exists. So the idea for our approach is going to be the fact that we only need to track the first two elements of a potential increasing triplet. First, which is the smallest number seen so far, and second, which will be the smallest number greater than first. If we ever find a number bigger than both first and second, we found a triplet. So for our solution, we're first going to start out by initializing first and second, and we're going to set it to infinity. This is just a marker to show that we haven't actually found a number that's small yet. And then we're going to start off by looping through the nums array. If the number we find is less than or equal to first, so it's the new smallest number that we found so far, we're going to set first to num. And if we find that it's less than or equal to second, we are going to set second equal to that. Else, we found a number that's both bigger than first and second, but it's still the smallest we found. So we're going to return true because there is a triplet. Else we're going to return false. And this works because we go through our array using a for loop sequentially. So we'll go through the smallest indices possible first. And let's test if this works. And yeah, it's been accepted. We can submit this now. Here we have LeetCode 65, valid number. We are asked to validate whether a string, s, represents a valid number. Valid numbers include integers with an optional sign, decimals with an optional sign followed by a decimal point and then digits, and an exponent, which is followed by e or a capital E and then an integer with an optional sign. And invalid examples for numbers will include strings with letters not an exponent, multiple signs, multiple dots, missing digits for exponents, etc. So for our approach, we can solve this without regex using a finite state check. We'll first trim the leading or trailing spaces, and then split the string at DE, if it's present. The left part will check for it being a decimal, and for the right part we'll check if it's an integer. We can also check for a decimal, and it can have a dot, but it must have at least one digit somewhere. And for the integer check, we'll only allow digits with an optional sign at the start. So for our solution, we're first going to leave the main function out for now. We're going to write two helper functions. First one is going to be called def_is_integer, which will take s as a parameter, which will be a string. Firstly, we'll check that the string actually exists, or it's not an empty string. If it is, then we'll return false, because it won't be an integer. We'll then check if the first digit of the string is in a string made up of plus and minus. This is going to be for the sign check. If it is, we're going to remove it by setting s to be the first digit second digit onwards. Then we're going to return s.isDigit. This will return whether it's made up of digits, and that the length is greater than 0. Because if the length is 0, then that means it was made up of only a single sign. Our next helper method is going to be isDecimal, which will again accept a string as a parameter. Again, we're going to check if it's not an empty string. We're going to remove the sign. And then after this, we're going to again check if after removing the sign, we have an empty string or not. And we'll return false in that case. Next, because this is a decimal, we're going to check whether it has a decimal point. If it doesn't have a decimal point, then we are going to have to check if it's an integer, which we can do by isDigit. Now at this point, we know that this number is a decimal because it has a decimal point. So we're going to split the string into two parts by the decimal point. We're first going to check if the left side of the decimal point and the right side of the decimal point are both empty, which in this case would mean that the string was a singular decimal point. we'll return false because a single decimal point is obviously not a number. If the left side is not empty, if it's not made up of digits, then we know that it's not a number again. And then we can do the same for the right side of the decimal point. And after we've checked all of this, we can return true because we've gone through all of our checks. And now we'll go all the way back up to our isNumber method. The first thing we're going to do is remove any trailing or leading spaces. And then we're going to check if this is an empty string. So if not s, return false. Now we're going to check for exponents. If e in s, or capital E in s, we're going to split it by the exponent. So we're going to split it by the lowercase e if e is in s, else s dot split by the capital E. Now we're going to check if the length of the part is not equal to 2, which would be the expected outcome, we'll return false, because this means there's more than one E in the string. Then we're going to split up our part into the base and exponents. And then we're going to return is decimal for the base, because our base could be a decimal, and our exponent has to be an integer. Else, if our string does not have an exponent, we just need to make sure that the number is a decimal. And that is our final solution. Alright, so I fixed a few things here by moving the helper functions outside of the class. And as we can see here, we've got our test result as expected. And we can submit. And yeah, here we go. Thanks for tuning in to LeetCode Weekly. If you enjoyed this first video, then be sure to like and drop a comment down below. Thanks for watching.